Well, welcome to today's live stream here on LinkedIn. Great to have everybody joining us. Hopefully everybody can to carve a few minutes out, and we'll jump into one of these hot topics of the day, which is how we can use AI in security. But I'm not alone today. With me is Jeremy Nelson, the North American CISO at Insight. Super excited to have him on the show with me today. Jeremy, good to see you, man. Thanks for jumping on.
Great to see you, Rocky. Always a pleasure getting to spend some time with one of my favorite cybersecurity professionals here at the Insight Company.
Likewise, man. We've been having a lot of fun together, just helping our customers and also just getting to know each other. Jeremy, we got acquired by Insight back in December last year, and so it's been a blast just working closely with the team, the larger Insight team, and it's really just brought a ton more to the table for what we can bring to bear for our customers, not just in the Microsoft and Amazon landscapes and the on-prem landscapes, but now we've got Google strengths. We've got this full multi-cloud, hybrid cloud capability that we can bring to bear. And so we're going to talk about some of those things today, but most importantly, just how we're seeing AI impact the security landscape and how it's helping our customers, how it's helping address specifically this challenge that we have, right? I mean, it's still, I checked 2 weeks ago on the skills availability, let's call it, in the security space. And Jared, this has been a problem for as long as I can remember. So this is probably the only industry I've ever seen like this, where there are never enough people to fill the jobs that are out there. So we've still over 3 million open jobs in cybersecurity. And if I'm remembering the stats right, there's like 600,000 people actually available to fill those jobs. So that's a huge problem.
Major gap.
The major gap. And so that just means like we got to do something here. Clearly, this is not a gap that's going to get filled, because this isn't the first time I've quoted that stat. It hasn't changed much in the several years that we've been talking about it. And in fact, I think for my entire career, since cyber became a thing that we really all invested in, that's always seems like it's always been the case, right? It's just hard to find people who know cyber well, can really leverage or bring that skill set to bear. So yeah, definitely something that's been a need for a while. And so, Jared, I mean, AI, how many conversations do you have where you don't talk about AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was literally just presenting earlier this week, and they were shocked that we'd gotten 5 minutes into the conversation before AI came up. So at this stage, it's 100%. Like, there literally isn't a conversation that goes by when we're talking about cybersecurity where AI doesn't play a role. And it's an interesting conversation, right? Is because AI has to be a part of the cybersecurity conversation, regardless of which side you're sitting on, because both sides are actively adopting AI to be able to help them achieve their means through lower effort, faster response, right? Like, the bad guys are going out there incorporating AI, and it's allowing them to accelerate their time to exploit. So when a vulnerability gets published, we're now down to a point where it's only about 4 hours before we see exploit code effectively being deployed out there in the wild. So that's crazy. Like, when you think about that, it used to be upwards almost like 20 days plus before we'd see something published. Organizations had 20 days to be able to get things patched, remediated, put controls in place to start blocking things. Now it's down to 4 hours. Something gets published, and 4 hours later, we got code that's being actively exploited. So, the bad guys are using it. So that means that the good guys need to be on the opposite side, trying to leverage those same models in order to be able to take advantage and be able to accelerate and addressing that skill gap that you already highlighted. Like, it's funny you say it hasn't changed much. If anything, what I've seen from a skill gap standpoint is that it's gotten worse. It's gotten wider. Like, the gap between supply and demand, the demand is greatly outpacing how quickly we can add the supply of skilled cybersecurity professionals to the pool. So AI is really one of the best answers to be able to help fill that gap rapidly.
Yeah, that 4 hour stat is just mind blowing, right? I mean,
right? Terrifying.
Yeah, and really, really terrifying. I mean, just think about, okay, so CrowdStrike, right? The CrowdStrike outage, obviously, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but it's a reality of just the way the tooling has to work today, is we have to now think about what does this mean for my systems, right? Those types of things. So it's not just CrowdStrike, it's going to be anything you do in the security space. It really highlighted the need to implement testing and A/B groups for your rollouts of patches, all that kind of stuff. But we got to do that in 4 hours. We got to do that in an hour. We can't just sit back and go, oh, well, we'll do that group next month. No, that's not a reality. Like, you can't do that. And so it's a real challenge. And I for sure think we need to be looking at how we use AI to do that. And of course, it's really exciting to see how much work is already being done in this space. I mean, all the tools that we have at our disposal in the security space, everybody's doing something with AI. Some of them are calling it AI. It's not AI, but on the whole, right, we're seeing a lot of good usage and integration. I mean, on the Google side of the house, Google's not only invested in AI generally, right, but they've made massive investments in security space. I mean, if you look at the IDC and the Gartner charts, Google's starting to shoot up to the top right quadrant and all those. And so you've got this big company who's making massive play at being a security company. And it's really good to see, especially from a company like Google, who has that pedigree of let's bring the latest technology forward. And so AI is no different. There's this battle, of course, out in the landscape of all these different Gen AI platforms. Google's right there in the fray. I posted today, how I use Gemini to do some smart brevity writing. If you want to go read that book, have fun later. But I was impressed. I mean, just in the few months of usage, it's gone from a tool that wasn't that great to now a tool that we rely on every day. And that's across the board. But then now look at security and the massive investments they've made there, things like their SecOps tooling, SCCE, and now you've got AI integrated to look at attack paths, right? Attack simulation to bring forward vulnerabilities, to show you what's bad in your code. I mean, all sorts of things that they're doing, not to mention, oh, you're a SOC analyst and you need to quickly diagnose a problem. AI is pulling together all of the relevant data and then bringing it forward to a SOC analyst and saying, hey, here you go. This is what you need to be looking at. This is how this is all related. Cutting down hours and hours and hours of search and research that an analyst would have to do in the face of a threat. And, I think that's probably one of the most beneficial things I'm seeing out in the landscape. I mean, I don't know about you, Jared, but that's for sure an area where I'm excited to see how AI is going to impact just the need to respond and respond well.
So here's the reality, right? Is threat actors take advantage of the fact that there is a tremendous amount of data. Like signaling has to come in through so many various different vectors in order for us to be able to detect it. And so it's very hard to kind of sort through all of that to be able to find those indicators that something truly negative is happening. The number of false positives is extreme. Like, so as a leader of a security operations center, as we talk to the various different analysts, as we look at our own tooling and understand the way that we're able to take in all of the relevant data from the various different entry points and to be able to draw that analytics and correlation. Like, it really is it's a data problem. And I think coming back to your point around Google and the investments that they're making, so it's a match made in heaven, really, because if anything, Google has proven over the years of their existence is that they are awesome at data. They're awesome at taking massive amounts. Like, you look at the vastness of what is the internet and their ability to kind of centralize that, understand natural language, how to couple that together to be able to get people to where they want to go, or be able to bring them forward the information that they're looking for more rapidly without necessarily even having to dive into or follow links to their different sites, and then be able to kind of collate and sort through all of that. They're very good at bringing that forward. So it really makes a lot of sense that they'd be able to use not only their existing technology, but then to continue to advance upon that with generative AI and everything that they're doing with Gemini and the various different platforms to be able to amass this tremendous amount of signaling and telemetry data that we collect from endpoints, infrastructure, applications, bring that all into its centralized data lake, and then be able to draw those correlations, do that analysis, and be able to really identify like where threats actually happening, and then alerting and then providing kind of next step prompts and guidance to security analysts to be able to investigate, rapidly triage, and move into response activities as quickly as possible. So yeah, it's really exciting to see. And again, when we think about generative AI, I think there's a lot of areas where we talk about that, where it's kind of a nice to have, where you look at it and you're like, oh, there's this theoretical productivity bump that you might get. But when you think about it in the context of really security operations and what it can do to be able to accelerate the ability to identify true attacks that are happening, to weed out the false positives, and to be able to give prompts and guidance on next steps for security analysts and really reduce that mean time to contain. Because that's really where a lot of us, the security leaders within the organizations that we support, are focusing. It's what is our mean time to contain. And generative AI is really all about compressing that as much as possible and really amplifying and enabling the limited resources that we have within our security operations centers to be able to do that as rapidly as possible.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I mean, that's not only is it such an important thing, but when you take a player like Google, who has this history of building platforms that comb through massive amounts of data, and now we have to do it. I mean, core tenets of good security practice, right? One, know everything that's going on inside your environment. Well, crap, that's a lot of data, right? So where does that all go? How do we sort through that in an effective way, at a low cost, right? And in a meaningful way? Because there's no point in collecting all that data if you do nothing with it, right? If you're not analyzing it, if you're not getting anything out of it from a forensic perspective, you just spend a whole bunch of money on nothing. But it's a necessary part of a good security practice, and that means we want to also be effective there. And so, yeah, it's been really neat to just see the progress in that space. But on top of all of that, the progress from an analyst perspective as a senior analyst, right? I mean, we talk about skills gap and great, I'm going to bring in a junior analyst and throw them at, leveraging these AI tools, and it's going to help them get up to speed fast. All of that is true. But your senior analyst, you can now be far more effective, right? It's much easier to go into a tool like SecOps, type a natural language query and say, hey, on this date, there was some anomaly here in our Okta environment. Tell me what's going on. And bam, here comes a bunch of queries that's, sorted. It's got all the irrelevant data brought forward. It's included all the right sources. It's written in the language of the tool. Like that's hugely beneficial as a
so powerful,
right?
Yeah. Well, that, and then you couple it together with the reduced number of escalations coming from the junior analysts into the senior analysts. So when you think about like how are we most productively using the limited resources and cycles that we have at that senior analyst level, we want to make sure that they really are responding to the most impactful and risky threats that we identify through these systems. And so, today, if you look at some of the legacy systems, there was a lot of not necessarily false positive. It's you got black, white, and then you've got this massive amount of gray that kind of sits between what's known good, what's known bad, and then this massive amount of gray. And so you kind of have to. It's the same thing as alert fatigue that you see within even the junior analyst space, but it's the same type of escalation fatigue that we see within those senior security analysts. And so empowering and driving better decision making into the lower levels reduces the number of unnecessary escalations to the senior level folks. And so not only do they now have a new toolkit available to them to help them be more productive and more rapid in their response, but they're also not having to deal as much with unnecessary escalations coming from the junior analysts as well. No, so it's productivity all over the place.
Yeah. Excuse me. I don't think I've ever thought about it, that particular problem. But yesterday in a meeting with a customer, and they're like, hey, our senior most security, person, the director of security for us, is constantly getting pinged. He's on call all the time with noise, right? It's just noise from the environment. And so if we can cut through that, that's a huge value for them, not only to not wear that poor guy out, but also just make sure you're getting the most effective usage out of this really high level resource, who can then also focus on other things that are going to further enhance the security posture, right? If you're getting pinged all day and all night with a bunch of low-level stuff that ultimately is just noise, you just wasted a really valuable resource that could have prevented the next attack, right? And that's where we need to be thinking. Really, it's not just I'm getting the most out of this person, and I'm helping them do their job better, but we're preventing the next attack, and that's super important. Which actually does lead to a really nice question, I guess, right? Is what's going on with dwell times and all these things. Like, what does an attack look like, and how is this really going to help us, right? So, Jeremy, I know you were talking about this recently. So, tell us, what are you seeing out there as you talk to customers and that CISO mentality around, just what an attack, the anatomy of attack.
Yeah. So I have both the fortune and maybe misfortune of being able to support our incident response team. And the only reason why it's a misfortune is because sometimes that we have to engage with our clients during some of their most difficult times, right? Like their darkest days. But I have the fortune because we are there to help. And we have the capabilities to kind of come in and help them get out of the situation that they're in. And so you're lucky. I actually brought a little bit of show and tell with me of a recent incident that we were personally involved in. And we can kind of use this as a jumping off point for our conversation to kind of talk about, like, what is the anatomy of an attack? What does this look like? How does this go down? And really, if we think about this through the lens of a security operations center, when we think about this through generative AI, and how does it identify some of these different points of attack that occurred in this particular instance, and you can kind of see in this particular event and example that I brought, you can see we'll kind of walk through where some things were missed. So in this particular instance, we had a threat actor who was out there scanning, and they identified an edge security appliance that had gone unpatched for a period of time. And so they were able to exploit a vulnerability in the underlying password management mechanism that allowed them to continuously try passwords. So once they identified a username and password, or a username, they were able to do infinite attempts on passwords without it getting locked out or alerting or things of that nature.
Oof.
So they were then able to create a VPN tunnel that allowed them access into the data center estate. So just traditional legacy IPsec VPN. They were then able to get access to a variety of different server and application assets that sat within this data center estate. Sadly, is that the same username and password that they were able to use to get into the VPN was the same credentials that sat on a variety of different operating systems inside of that data center. They were able to use it to log into remote consoles. From there, there were some unpatched systems that wasn't running effective EDR software. So they were able to download malicious code, like a payload to those systems, execute them, elevate privileges. They scraped the entire identity source for this particular environment. And then they were able to start scanning. They found a shared service area. They were able to get into the underlying infrastructure and then executed and detonated an encryption package that basically took down all applications, all systems, all services for this entire data center. And here's the scary part. And this is the part that I want to highlight, because I think it's most relevant to our conversation here, Rocky, is that this whole thing transpired over a period of just 28 days. So from the time that they were able to get in to the time that they detonated the ransomware encryption package, it was only 28 days.
That's
and the amount of knowledge that they were able to amass about this environment is incredible. But if we come back to what we've been talking about, there are so many steps along the way during that 28-day period where an effective SOC organization, with collecting the right amount of signaling data from the right parts of the infrastructure, having the right kind of endpoint protections deployed, would have been able to capture a lot of the activities that were happening here with a SOC team that was enabled through both tooling on the SIM side, as well as through a generative AI and data correlation engine, would have been able to identify this and potentially stop this threat actor in their tracks.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, 28 days isn't that long.
No.
And I think the real, kind of, you highlighted the real challenge isn't even the timeline so much as like somewhere along the line, somebody should have noticed, right? And that's where AI helps us, right? Because all that
Correct.
data was probably there in their SIM, right? It was sitting there, just got missed somehow. And that's where AI in this case really helps you, because I'm just going to say, hey, you've got all this failed logon attempts suddenly for this one user, and that's in the logs. And again, when you're collecting terabytes and terabytes of data every day, every hour, every month, I mean, depending on the size of your organization, even small organizations that we see hundreds of gigabytes of log data. Log data is not very big. So if you've got hundreds of gigabytes of log data, that's a lot of data to comb through.
That's text.
Yeah, it's text.
100 gigabytes
Tiny.
of text. That is tremendous. Yes.
And good luck. Like, I don't know about you, but sitting down to read through hundreds of gigs of log data doesn't sound super exciting. And that means it's not exciting for analysts either, right? They don't have the time to do that, and to catch all of those things.
Yeah.
And so this is where
literally humans can't do it.
That. Yeah,
like
you can't.
That's where we've reached. Like, regardless of the skill gap, like when you just think about sheer volume, the number of people that it would take to be able to sort through 100 gigabytes of text data and to effectively draw the correlations, because you'd still have to like slice it up in some way, shape, or form and be able to do that analytics and correlation. It's literally impossible for humans. Like, it is, the machines have to step in. Like, we have to rely on the machines, or else there's the threat actors will absolutely be able to just kind of hide under the covers and slip through, no matter how much data we're collecting.
Yeah, and this really drives home kind of what we've been talking about, right? If AI had been applied here, it's likely it would have been caught, but also the response, the right actions to take, any code that needed to be done, right? All of that would have been handled as well in a much shorter time period. Not that this customer couldn't have done all those things, not that their analysts couldn't have dug in and figured out the right response and the right actions, all those things. Of course they can, right? And then again, it's not like AI is doing something we're not doing, but rather, obviously, it can do it at machine scale. So you can process terabytes of data in a few minutes and then say, yeah, this is something that's anomaly. We need to go look at this, and it's tied to this, this, and this. And then as a human, you can quickly look and say, yeah, that's, I know what that is, right? I got to go patch that firewall, or I've got to make sure there's endpoint protection out there, or I'm going to go lock that person's account. And, at some point, we'll get to the point where AI is also taking those actions. I think we're a little ways from that, just as it's such a new thing, right? That it's going to be hard to trust. I mean, it's hard for me to trust it, right? So you don't want to have a denial of service because your AI shut your company down to protect you from something that so that's a whole challenge, obviously.
You use the right keyword, Rocky. It's trust, right? Like at the end of the day, it's always a trust but verify. In fact, I was meeting with one of our partners, and we were talking about like the role of AI in cybersecurity, and at what point do we get to where we can actually execute a remediation automatically without human intervention? And we kind of philosophized about that first to a certain extent, and it really kind of came back to it. You have to build trust, right? And the best way to build trust is you start off with something simple, where you identify something that would trigger some type of a remediation to be taken by the system. But what you do is you give a big red button, and you allow a human being to go in, to look at it, to inspect it, to make sure that they're comfortable that it's not a false positive, and then to click the button. And it's kind of like, I equated it to like Pavlov's dog, right? And you see it replicated, and you see it referenced to in a variety of different scenarios, comedies, dramas, mostly comedies. But you give that behavior enough, and they get accustomed to just like, oh, okay, I know what this is. I click it, I trust it. I click it, I trust it. And then once you reach to a certain extent of trust, where they're like, okay, these are clearly all valid positive identifications that have been detected by the system, I don't need to click the red button anymore. I am okay trusting the machine to make that decision and to just execute a plan, so that way there's not this time gap between when it identifies a problem, my availability to come check it, research it, identify it as valid, and then clicking a button, right? So I think that's really where we're getting to, is like, how do you build that trust, and coming up with those psychological ways that we work with the various different IT organizations that we support, so they can get that trust built up. And but it's also, there's an element of training the AI models. Like, as we're going through that and clicking that button, we're also giving feedback back to the generative AI that, yes, this is good, right? Like, yes, this is good. But if we do ever click anything that says, no, this is a false positive, that directly goes back to learning and enabling it to make better decisions in the future.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And I think the other thing we're going to see is AI checking AI, right? I mean, this is an area where AI creates a bunch of code or generates code that's going to be the remediation. Well, you can use AI to analyze that code and say, yes, this is good. No, it's not, right? So now you're entering into this. It's not just in the analysis and the recommendation, but it's also can be a tool that we use to ensure that whatever the recommendation is also true. Checking AI with other AI, right? I mean, just again, in that comment that I posted on LinkedIn today around using Gemini to do this smart brevity writing, somebody else says, well, have you tried Claude? Claude's a great engine for writing. Well, like, no, actually, I haven't tried it. But that's the kind of mindset, right? Like, hey, we can check this one from this engine against, and this platform against this one. And then now we're getting multiple views. But again, we can do all that in a couple minutes, right? Yeah. Instead of, hey, Jeremy, can you look at this for me? And you're like, yeah, sure, I'll look at it when I get off this plane. And like 4 hours later, you land and you look. And then you're like, yeah, this looks weird to me. I don't know. Let me go check with John. And so you send it to John, and he sends it to Adam. And 5 days later, right, we're like, yeah, we're all comfortable with this now, right? Here we're talking about in a few minutes, I can analyze it, look for bad practice, and say, no, let's not do that. And that leads really to kind of like, what are we doing with our customers in this space, right? And we're doing a number of things. So again, I mentioned earlier, it's been a pleasure to just get to know Jeremy and the broader security team here. We launched our managed security service, and all of this stuff that we're talking about is part of that service, right? We are using the SecOps platform from Google with all the AI tools. We're bringing that to bear for our customers. That's feeding our SOC analysts, right? They're the ones that are also taking advantage of this AI every day, both on the SecOps platform, the other platforms we support across the broader Insight portfolio. I mean, these are the things. We're not just saying, hey, we should go do this, and Mr. Customer, you should go do this, but like we are actively doing the same thing for our customers and for our services. I mean, I think that speaks volumes to the trust that you're talking about, right? We're not just saying, hey, you should do this, good for thee, but not for me, right? It's none of that, right? We're eating our own dog food, again, another silly analogy, but it's the
drinking our own champagne. So Joyce likes to refer to drinking our own champagne.
Drinking our own champagne. I like it.
Yeah. But I think one thing that you just talked about there, Rocky, that's worth highlighting, right, is that when we talk about like what are we doing, right? So as we think about addressing the skill gap, I think at least today and at least for the foreseeable future, generative AI isn't a complete replacement for the need for good, skilled, competent, and capable security analysts, threat hunters, right, penetration testers, that they continue to augment and allow those resources to scale a lot more effectively, but it's not a direct one-for-one replacement. And so I think, just calling out that, one of the other areas we're helping clients is by providing a managed security operations center that allows them to kind of, for all intents and purposes, time slice, right? Both the cost from a tooling as well as from a development, skill creation, staffing perspective, allow them to kind of share that across a broader subset of organizations, really makes that more effective so they can get that complete picture. So it's not a complete reliance on a tool-based system, that they do actually get access to industry-leading subject matter experts who really can kind of drive that outcome for them in collaborate, who get optimized and enabled through the use of generative AI technology.
Yeah. And that's where, because we are the ones doing that, like we can do it for them. We've got a huge team of folks who are leveraging these tools. And so we can build that trust with our customer. And instead of just saying, hey, here's some tools and it's got these AI things and, go test it out. And then over time, using the example you gave of like, here's the big red button, click it if you think it's good. But like we can do that proactively for them as well through these managed offerings, where then now we're getting a larger sample size than they're ever going to get, right? Because now we're taking hundreds of customers, hundreds of responses on a daily basis, and we're analyzing those and looking at the results and using these AI platforms and saying, yes, click the button. And when we get those no's, we're going to get them faster. We're going to get a larger sample size. And so we're able to help train these models as well at a scale that, gives us trust, which then we can in turn pass to our customers and say, hey, actually, we've been operating your environment with this automation, with this AI for a long time. So you can trust it as well. And then that gives them also that comfort to know, hey, not only can it be done, but now we can expand how we're doing it to our own resources as well. So those are all positive things, I think, for our customer base as they engage with us in multiple ways, right? Not just on the implementation side of the house, but managed services across, design, et cetera, right? In every area, we are using this stuff every day, and that's giving more and more trust to our teams, to our senior consultants, and so that helps hopefully also help our customers know, this is tried and true. We can do it in our environment without running afoul or bringing things down, right? Which nobody wants to do. So, Jeremy, any kind of final thoughts for our audience here today? And again, thanks for jumping on with me.
Yeah, I mean, my final thoughts would really be like, if you're sitting there and you're wondering, like, what are your next steps when you're looking at the overall maturity of your security operations program and figuring out how do you augment that? One of the things that I would highly recommend is, looking at what your tooling is, understanding what their roadmap is. How are they looking to embrace generative AI? Not just, you don't want it to just be a gimmick. We want to make sure that it's something that's going in and actually doing something productive, other than, just allowing somebody to go in and ask it a question and getting a prompt back. Like generative AI needs to be doing something that is directly reducing the number of false positives and directly adding to the productivity of the team. So, that evaluation, I think, is extremely important. Just understanding what are the investments that you made and how are they going to continue to mature and allow your organization to optimize. And if you're struggling with, trying to address this massive chasm that we're seeing as far as supply and demand around security operations, or qualified cybersecurity professionals, I would highly recommend, reach out, do a little bit of investigation into what a managed security operations center offering would look like at a relatively reasonable cost to be able to directly increase your overall cybersecurity profile in a really, really rapid fashion, and something that will set you up for continued maturity and growth over time.
Love it. Couldn't have said it any better. We've got a lot of things we're doing in this space. Obviously, we do this at scale across hundreds of customers every day. So we would love to talk to you about any of their services, any of these tools, and how you can get the most out of them. So, Jeremy, thanks again. Looking forward to having more discussions in the future with our customers. Thank you all for tuning in today. Truly appreciate it. And I guess that's a wrap for our LinkedIn Live here today. So again, thank you for joining us. I'm Rocky Giglio, Global Director of Security at SADA, and Jeremy Nelson, North American CISO at Insight. Thank you all for tuning in today.
Thanks, Rocky.